So I understand that the Los Angeles Clippers are viewed as the neglected stepchild of Los Angeles by a lot of people. But when you look at the performance that Jerry West has put on in the front office for this team the past couple years, I think they start to become really interesting when you look at the next offseason in the NBA. Not only for their cap space, but I think given that NBA players nowadays are not just brain-dead robots, they notice things that teams do, right? Like they notice the way players are treated. They notice head coaches, and Doc Rivers is still one of the more respected head coaches among NBA players. I mean, he was a big reason why Chris Paul ended up re-signing with the Clippers a while back now at this point. They also look at just the situation teams are in terms of money, and I mean, I remember Al Horford, he said that a big reason why he chose to sign with the Celtics is because he saw like all the draft picks they had and the performance Danny Ainge was putting on, and he said, well, I can, age gracefully into that. And sure, the Kemba Walkers, DeMarcus Cousins of the world are not as old as Horford was, but I do think that NBA players still care about these things, and I'll dive into all of these things in a moment, but I gotta set it up first here that, like, I wouldn't totally rule it out that the Clippers are just a non-factor in free agency, Sure, do I think they're going to be in, like, a potential Kevin Durant running? I mean, probably not, but, you look at someone like LaMarcus Aldridge, right? He's not a free agent, but we saw with him, we saw with Paul George, those two chose their situations because they liked them from a basketball standpoint, right? They liked the culture, they liked all that stuff, and they chose that over the glitz and the glamour of Los Angeles, even if someone like a LeBron James chose LA for a lot of those reasons. And because the basketball team, the young dudes are pretty damn good. I like pretty much all those guys. But it is very possible for NBA players to care more about the inner workings of a franchise than the city they necessarily play in. Although Los Angeles still helps the Clippers out a lot, because while the Clippers are the butt of many jokes, they were oftentimes towards the top of the league in attendance when the team was good, and they're still like the 8th or 9th highest team in terms of profit, even with them not being that good. So let's not act like the Clippers are just some low market team. But anyway, when we look at the situation, besides just the cap space, it's all the versatility this team has right now. If they bought out Gallinari next season, that would give them comfortably over $40 million to work with, which can at least get you one really good NBA player in free agency. And the other thing is, you look at the veterans on this team, between Avery Bradley, Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, Tobias Harris, all of these guys are on short contracts, which means they're all tradable. In the case of Tobias Harris, it could be like a sign and trade, same thing with Beverley. So, any of these guys could be moved for some star player that potentially becomes available, because these are all decent NBA players. But the other thing it does is it also says to any really good free agent who might be thinking about the Clippers, if I go there, they're already going to have some win-right-now players, right? Like, Tobias Harris has gotten better every season. Bradley's one of the better two-way players in the league. Lou Williams was great for them this previous season. Beverley, as long as he's healthy, is a really quality two-way dude. And actually, to go back to if one of these guys was potentially moved, I mean, between Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Sindarius Thornwell, the one other dude they drafted right after Alexander, or before him, I don't remember. These are other trade chips. So the Clippers are just in this really cool position where it's like you could either go for some star players, and I think a big one for them could be Boogie, or Kemba Walker, just because they're like the next tier after the top of the top. So you could go for one of those guys, have all the money in the world, and then if you get one of them, you have a decent team immediately. And then you could be in a position to trade for someone else with some of the other guys you still have. But if you don't get any of those dudes, then you could still roll with some of these young guys that you have, and then you could try to get more assets, more draft picks, whatever, because these dudes remain pretty decent trade pieces. Now sure, Tobias Harris, Bradley, these guys, they're not going to get you too much, but protections on first-round picks, maybe just a flat-out unprotected first-round pick, one young player who's exciting, who knows? But at least they have that option. And they allowed this to happen by getting out of that Blake Griffin contract, you know? And, I mean, I think I've been kind of implying all of this, but I haven't just flat out said it. The Clippers could also be, like, kind of decent this year. Like, I don't expect them to comfortably make the playoffs, and I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't make it at all. But because all these guys are solid players, and Doc Rivers is a good coach, and they have some okay role players with Mbah Moute and Montrezl Harrell and everything, and Marcin Gortat's still a serviceable NBA center, say if this team managed to win 42 games, let's say, and they miss out on the playoffs by, I don't know, 5 or 6 games, but it's a fun team, there's a lot of good energy, they have some big games here and there, Lou Williams is pretty much what he was last season, and then not only would some of the off-the-floor stuff in the way Jerry West has performed and all that potentially look good to free agents, but then you look at the actual team and you'd be like, well, you know, that team, if I was on that team, and maybe Boogie is saying this to himself, then maybe we can compete for like 50-something wins. Now, maybe the fact that they don't have anyone within like the top 20, and maybe Lou is in the top 30, maybe Tobias is in the top 30, I don't know. Maybe that would mean that they would only win 35 games and they're not as exciting, but I mean, I don't know. But I do think there's a possibility they could be pretty decent, so there's that. The only thing that sucks is they might not get their pick this season, just because it's protected from like a Jeff Green trade that Doc Rivers was the architect of. I mean, if they don't make the postseason, then they get their pick, and I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, so there you go. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they ended up losing out on that pick, because I think showcasing to everybody else that we could still get into the playoffs would be huge. But I don't know. I'm not freaking out too much about that. I think there's a lot more good stuff than bad stuff for this Clippers situation. So yeah, to sum this whole thing up, I think while the Clippers are still not the Lakers, they still have Los Angeles going for them. On top of, between Doc Rivers, Jerry West, still a decent enough team. I think there's a lot of reasons for a star to go, you know what? I think I should go there, and then we can be pretty alright. Or if that doesn't happen, then they could potentially still trade for a star because they have a decent amount of assets. So they're really in a win-win situation, you know? Potential to trade for a star, sign a star, and if not that, you still have some okay young players and you don't have any super long contracts that are killing you. So that's it on the Clippers. A new podcast in the description. The worst case scenario for every Eastern Conference team, Eminem's new album, Kamikaze, and a whole lot of stuff on Parks and Recreation, which I watched in a couple days.